the vocab still in?
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at 13.4. It's the last section that we're going to do for the semester. Yay. And we're going to take a look at costs and advantages of home ownership. And just looking at you, my guess is that most of you have not sort of thought about this before because you're not at the point where you've purchased a home. So my hope is that at some point when you do, and probably in the next 10 years, most of you will be in a position where you're going to try to do so, is that you start to think about and you ask the right questions so that you can make good decisions for yourself. Because I will tell you, we've purchased 4 houses. We've never lived in, no, I don't look that old, do I? We've purchased 4 homes. We've never lived in any of them for very long, which number one's not a real good idea. None of the cases was it an intentional, hey, we're only going to live here for 2 years situation, but that's where we were. And we have learned so much from the process, and I would love it if you didn't have to make the same mistakes that I did. Because there's just so much that we didn't know, and nobody thought, hey, this would be important to tell those people who are about to go buy that home and spend lots of money that they don't know what they're doing. So I want you to sort of gain some insight into this so that when the time does come, you know how to ask the right questions, and you know a place to go, people to talk to maybe in your life, not necessarily me, although you're welcome to email me. But people that you can ask right questions to, and that maybe you know the kinds of questions you should be asking, because we didn't know the types of questions we should be asking, okay? So let's take a look at a few of these things. A few of them you know the terms, because they're used very frequently just in conversation, especially considering that you guys have gone through recent, elections, and a lot of these things have come up in recent elections too, over the past 2 election cycles at least. So the first one is a mortgage. A mortgage is simply a home loan. It's typically a substantial amount of money. People don't typically get a home loan for 40 grand, okay? That's like a car loan amount, although that would be a big car loan. Home loans are typically a big amount, and they're typically over quite a lengthy time, much longer length of time than most of the consumer loans we were looking at back in Section 2. Also sometimes called a deed of trust or a security deed, okay? A down payment, okay, does this seem awfully small today, like smaller than normal? All right, we'll just see how long it lasts anyway. All right, a down payment, but you can still read it. Yeah? Okay. A down payment is just like the down payments we've been doing on all the other problems. It's the amount of money you pay up front for, in this case, the home. Okay, down payment. The next thing is the term, and a term is the length of time it takes you to pay it off. Okay, so that's just the number of months or the number of years, and in this case, we're still going to be looking at numbers of years. And more commonly, people will talk about home loans in years, whereas they talk about car loans in months. So you're going to hear years used prevalently. All right, the principal amount of the mortgage is simply the amount of the mortgage. It's the amount that you pay for the home. Just like when we were looking at these, it's the amount that you're financing. These ones that we just did on the board. Amount that's financing, you take the cost of the item and you subtract the down payment. Everybody good with that? Okay. There's at least a couple of different kinds of mortgages, and we're going to talk about a couple, let me say it that way, of kinds of mortgages. The one we're going to spend the most time on is a fixed rate mortgage. Okay? A fixed rate mortgage is the way that we've been thinking about loans on everything we've done so far. The value of the interest, the amount that we're looking at, the percent, doesn't change. That's what it means for the rate to be fixed. It just doesn't change. There are other kinds of loans. We'll talk about them briefly at the end of this section because I want you to be aware that they exist and discouraging you from ever using them, and we'll talk about why. All right? But this is a fixed rate mortgage. And then amortizing is the process that goes by, which shows how much of the money you pay every month towards the principal and how much you pay in interest every month. So typically what happens is this, and this is what happened when we had our very first home that we bought was in Kansas, is that at closing, which is the time where you actually take possession of the home, they give you keys. That's a good thing. You want to be able to get in the house. But they also give you a lot of paperwork. I mean, you feel like you're signing your life away. And one of the pieces of paperwork from the lending institution, the bank or the credit union or whatever, is this amortization schedule. And what it does is it tells you month by month, for however long the loan is that you're taking it out for, exactly how much of your money is being paid towards the value of the home and how much of the money is being paid towards the luxury of being able to borrow the money from the lender. Okay? So we're going to look at an abbreviated amortization schedule because obviously if somebody's taking out, let's just say for instance, a 20-year loan, because we're going to do that in a moment. If we did a 20-year loan and we do this amortization for every month, how many months are going to be in my schedule? 12 per year, but how many years? I said 20 years. So what's 12 times 20? 240. We're not going to fill out a 240-page table. You're welcome. Right. We're not going to do that, all right? We're not going to fill out a chart, an Excel spreadsheet for 240 months worth of a loan. But I'm going to show you how they are figured by doing 2 or 3 months at a time. Okay, so we're just going to do the very first piece of an amortization schedule and see how that process works. Are we all good so far? Okay. Now, there is one formula that you're going to have to know or put on your note card to be able to use, and this is the regular monthly payment formula. So taking a look at the regular monthly payment, most of this you've seen before, but it's, of course, expressed differently. What is P anytime we've done it? Principal. And in the case of a loan, what does that mean?
Finance number, or how much it costs, what does that mean?
Right. It's the amount that you're borrowing, right? So it's the amount that you have for the cost of the product minus your down payment. So that's P. What is R? The rate as a decimal. Remember to change it into decimal form.
That's an R?
That is an R. I know it's really hard for you to see a little bit of it. And the other thing down here is this value here is not a T. It looks like one. But if I try to erase it, it's going to mess everything up. So there's a plus sign right here. Okay, this says 12 plus R. So I've got a 12. I've got a 12 plus R down here. And then over here I've got a 12T. And what's T?
Time in years.
Time in years. So you guys know all these letters, right? This is not anything new in terms of letters. What is new is how the formula is going to work.
I'm sorry, that's 12 TR or 12 plus R?
This is 12 plus R.
Okay.
Yes.
P was principal?
P is principal, yes. Now, a word of caution, just like when we did compound interest, we're going to do these in little, bite-sized chunks to make sure that our calculator doesn't flip out and give us something that we weren't expecting. So as we're working on this, we're going to figure out what's inside these sets of parentheses. We're going to find that out. We're not going to enter this straight into the calculator in the middle of all the mess, okay? This calculation for the exponent, we're actually going to figure out what that exponent calculates to. We're not going to type in 12 times 7, or we're not going to do that, okay? Are we all good on that? All right. Closing costs are actually the costs that are incurred when you close on the house. So believe it or not, you don't just pay for the house. When you buy the house, you pay for a lot of other things at the same time. Sometimes there's realtor fees. Sometimes there's certain taxes you're responsible for. Depending on how you set your loan up, you may be responsible for part of the insurance in advance on that you're going to have on the piece of property. You might be responsible for part of the taxes in advance on the piece of property. There's also fees that go to the closing company, the lease or the title company, because they're the ones who issue you this piece of paper that says, yes, you are the owner. Obviously, you want them to give you that piece of paper. Otherwise, you're paying money on something that you don't own. Sounds an awful lot like renting, right, with legal ramifications, which would be really bad. So we need that too, and so that's another piece of the closing costs. So closing costs are also figured not just on how much your down payment is, although your down payment would also be in the closing cost. So there's several things that are in that closing cost amount. We are back to our favorite couple, Ann and Andy. Ann and Andy decided they are ready to buy a home, and they find the perfect house. They negotiate with their realtor for a purchase price of $120,000, but they only qualify for a loan for $100,000, fixed rate loan, 3.75% interest rate, and it's for 20 years. Okay, so we actually see many of the pieces right in here that we're going to need for that R equals formula later, right? You see the number of time, the length of time, you see the interest rate, and inside of this is actually also the principal, how much they're borrowing. But we're going to take it one piece at a time. The first question we're going to talk about is, what down payment must they come up with? How much? And how did you get $20,000, Matt? Right. So the house costs $120,000, right? And the lending institution is only willing to let them borrow $100,000. Perhaps that's because of what their salaries are, or maybe how long they've been at their job. Perhaps that is because of where the house is located, or maybe even the value of the home. The value of the home is not worth enough, but somebody's charging more than it's worth, and they still want to buy it for that. They may have to come up with a difference in order to make that possible. Okay, some housing markets are like that, not most. So, just like Matt said, that gives us $20,000. So they're going to pay $20,000 down on this house. Are we good so far? Easy subtraction problem, right? What will their monthly payment cost be to amortize principal and interest? So this is a monthly payment cost monthly payment cost. And that's the brand new formula that you just learned, right? All right. I think I've got space over here too. No, I don't. All on this slide. Okay. So we've got R equal. And in my formula, and let me write it all in pieces down here and we'll continue. I've got P times R over 12 divided by 1 minus 12 over 12 plus R to the 12t. Did I get that written right? Okay, so let's piece this together what we know. Working just from left to right, straight across. What's P? That's $100,000. That's the amount they're borrowing, right? What is R? 0.0375. 12's 12, so we're putting 12 right in there. My denominator, I have 1 minus, I have 12 on top, excuse me, and then I have 12.0375 on bottom. Are we okay with the fact that I already add that together? Now all of that 12 over the 12.0375 is raised to a power. Part of it's 12. 12 times what? Time in years, which is 20. Yes, you guys got it. Good. Okay, now just like I said, we're going to break this down into chunks, and we're only going to do one chunk at a time. Are we okay? Yeah, okay. Yes, that is one of the ones we're going to do. The other thing we're going to do is, if you notice on top, this is all multiplication and division. Order of operations, multiplication and division are considered equal. I know you're going to have to remember that. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or PEMDAS as the acronym maybe that some of you have seen before. The multiplication and division sort of looks like multiplication comes before division. It doesn't. It doesn't really matter because they're the same operation. We can just do the whole numerator working from left to right. So let's do that right now because we're going to have to write something down anyway. So we'll take 100,000, multiply by 0.0375, and divide by 12. We're doing the whole numerator at one time. And I need to know what you get.
$212 or $312.
Right. Okay, did everybody get that who has a calculator and tried it? 312.5 right here. Did you get that too, Alexis? Sure. We're doing the top. You got it? How are you doing, Mackenzie?
I'm
on another part. That's fine. Okay, that's okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the part inside of the, well, I'm going to put the 1 minus. We're going to do the part that's inside this parentheses. So take 12 and divide by 12.0375. And when you do that, I want you to write down the value with a lot of decimals. And how many have I told you a lot? Like 7. We need a bunch, okay? So we're going to write this value down with 7 decimals. What is it?
9, 6, 8, 8, 4, 7.
Okay. And round or don't round the last one. It really, the last digit's not going to matter on the rounding. So if you round it up, you round it down, it really is okay. Just write it down. What's my new exponent? 240. Good. All right. Now, taking a look at this, you need to remember your order of operations. What would we do next? The exponent. You're exactly right. So this number that you had with the 7 digits, I need you to raise it to a power of 240. Okay, I still have 312.50 on top. It is. It's 0.9968847. Mm-hmm.
.47 to you want all of it?
Give me 7 of them.
Okay. 1, 5,
One more.
2.
All right, perfect. Now what? Subtraction. And I know that it sort of looks like the subtraction maybe it seems a little bit off, but this division right here is happening, but it has to be divided by the subtraction of these two, the difference here. So I need to do my subtraction before I do any division. So I need you to subtract this value first. So still have 312.50 on top. What's on bottom? I'll start you out. It's 0.5 something. 27084 7? Something like this, fairly close to that. Again, if your end of your value is slightly different, like this says 8 or 6 or something, it's okay. It's not going to hurt anything in the long run, okay? All right, so last thing you need to do then is what? Divide. So once you take 312.50 and divide by that 0.5270847, and this amount will be your monthly payment. What is it?
$592.88.
$592.88.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have confirmation from anyone? Double check. We got two people.
That's right.
There's three. And they're not sitting next to each other, so that's a good sign, right? Okay, so we're good with that. So about $600, yeah? So they borrowed $100,000 for the next 20 years. They're going to be paying about $600 a month to live there. Sounds like a pretty good deal. Maybe right, this would be reasonable, perhaps. You have to be careful, though, right? Because $600 is probably a good deal, but not if you make $800. All right, sounds like a great payment right here, but not if you're living in a ghetto. Right? I mean, there's things that make this not necessarily a good deal, but on the surface, this looks pretty reasonable. All with me so far? Okay, I wanted to show you something that you may or may not realize. A conservative estimate for home ownership is a 15-year fixed-rate mortgage, 20% down, so they're actually pretty close to these details, right? They got the almost 20% down. They had 20 grand on 120, so not quite 20%, but they're close. They didn't do a 15-year, they did a 20-year. Again, they're close. And no more than 25% of your take-home pay, right? So like I said, if this was a $600 monthly payment and they make $800, they're going to have difficulty eating and keeping lights on because those things cost money too. So we want to make sure when we're looking at these numbers, because I will tell you, typically speaking, lending institutions will let you borrow more than half of your take-home pay as your mortgage payment. So let's say, for instance, that you did make, $10,000 a month. They'll let you borrow about $5,000 a month worth of a mortgage payment. And that may sound like big numbers and that should be fine, but the problem is with bigger mortgage usually comes bigger electricity and bigger gas costs and bigger a lot of things. And you quickly find yourself running out of money and you don't get to go do anything because you're stuck in this house that you're paying a lot of money for out of your take-home pay. So 25% take-home pay is considered a conservative, and that doesn't mean like liberal versus conservative. It means like conservative in terms of being careful with your money estimate, okay? So let's take a look then at what's going to happen next. I want to show you how to do an amortization schedule. It's not difficult, okay? But what it does is it gives you some insight into what actually happens when you make those $600 or nearly $600 monthly payments. All right, so the first thing is we're only going to do 2 months of this. We're not going to do 240 of them, okay? The first column you see is the payment column. That's not changing every month. And the reason it's not changing is because the interest rate isn't changing. That's one of the reasons why we like that fixed rate on the interest rate, is because it's not going to make my monthly payment change. So what was my total payment? Because I already did that. I'm not going to do it again. What did we get? All right, $592.88. Same every month. So if I asked you to do 6 months of this, which I'm not, but if I did, this column is going to be the same all the way straight down the paper. Everybody good with that? Okay, second thing then is interest payments. Now you know how to find an interest payment because you've been doing it now for over a week. How do you find an interest payment? How do you do it? It's PRT. So we take P times R times T. What is the principal at the very outset of this loan? $100,000. Remember, principal is simply how much I borrowed. They borrowed, Ann and Andy borrowed $100,000. What was their interest rate?
0.0375.
Good, 0.0375. And what am I going to put in for T?
15.
Nope. Nope.
20 years, what is the loan?
Nope.
18. No.
Nope.
240.
Okay, I'm going to write the number down, and then you guys are going to have to explain why it makes sense. Let's try that way.
This is the first one.
This is the payment for 1 month. not for the whole loan. Okay, we're not doing it for the whole loan. We're doing a 1 month payment here. But still, time is measured in years, so we've got to have it represented in terms of a year. So this is 1 out of 12 months of the year. Make sense? Okay, so for amortization, that T is always going to be 1/12. All right, for what we're doing. I mean, there are other ways of calculating it, but everything you're going to do with your book is a monthly payment, so you're going to do 1/12. All right, did you get a value? 312 what? So take a look at that. Month number 1, you pay almost $600 for your payment. More than half of it goes to the bank for them to put in their pockets, right? Now I want you to try something for a moment. Here's what I want you to try, okay? Real quick, grab your calculator. I'm not going to write this down, but I want you to try this for a moment. I want you to change this 0.0375 in this calculation. I want you to make it 7%. So 0.07. I want you to calculate it at 0.07 for me.
$183.33.
That sounds low. Try again.
$583.38.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Sorry, I heard you say 100 at the beginning. I'm sorry, Tyler. Yes, $583.30. Now be careful because that sort of made that sound a little bit misleading. The total payment that we calculated a slide or two back, that would have had to change too. It would not be $592. It'd be higher as well. But that interest rate change changes your monthly payment. It changes the amount of money that's going towards interest to the bank. Huge. It's a huge figure. And 7% was considered a very good interest rate when we bought our first home. 3.5 right now. I don't know about now as in exactly today, but ballpark recent 3.5, 3.75 is what things are using now in the 3s and 4s. Okay, so it's different. Times change on what's considered good. Now, how do we figure out how much of this money is the principal payment?
Interest and how much goes to the 100,000.
Right. This is the amount of money, $592, that we're actually paying. If $312.50 is going towards interest, then the rest of it is going towards the actual value of the home, which is a principal payment.
I thought we had those, that's how much we paid for that.
Nope.
Okay, all right, I can remember.
Are you good now?
Yeah.
Okay. So our principal payment is found by taking the total payment, how much money we actually are going to pay to live here, and subtracting off the money that just disappears. Because for all intents and purposes, for us as the consumer, that's exactly what happens to interest. When we pay it, it goes away, right? It just went away. I mean, it didn't pay for anything except for the fact that we owed money to somebody and they allowed us to borrow it. Okay, so $312.50 disappears, but the amount of money right here is the actual amount of money that my new, that actually went towards my mortgage. So how much was this? Did I write that right, Alice? Okay. So at principal payment, the amount that went towards interest is $280.38. How would I find out the balance of my principal?
200,000 minus 280.
Exactly. We'll take the amount that we originally borrowed, my previous amount I owed, $100,000, and we'll subtract off the amount of my payment that actually went towards the principal, which was the $280.38. I guarantee I'm going to ask you to do this on the test. You're going to do an amortization schedule for me, so make sure you understand where all these numbers came from and went to.
The last box in.
It says balance of principal. It's the balance that you owe on the loan. What does this give me? 9971962. Did I hear that right, Mackenzie? Awesome. So after 1 month, you no longer owe anybody $100,000. That's good. But I mean, you still owe them $99,700. Maybe not so good on that perspective of it. You still owe, but you don't owe the $100,000 anymore. All right, so this was month 1. Sorry, question, yes.
Can you back up? I'm sorry.
You bet.
Balance,
Yes.
that's the 100,000?
That's the original $100,000.
Okay.
That was our first amount that we had that we owed money for. And then we paid the $280.38 towards that. So we don't owe it $280 of that anymore. We paid that off.
Okay, all right, I just wanted
The $100,000 from the original problem.
okay.
Yeah. Over here, they borrowed $100,000. That's where it came from. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, good questions. All right, so let's see what happens in on month 2, because month 2 will not have the same calculations. Well, it'll have the same calculations, but it won't have the same numbers in the calculations anymore, okay? I need to figure out my interest payment, but I won't figure it out on a $100,000 loan anymore. Why not?
Because you already paid for months, so it'd be 9.
Right, I pay less interest, right? Because I now owe less money. Granted, not a lot less, but I do owe a little bit less money than I did a month ago. So my interest payment, so now I'm on, this is month 2. Let me change colors. So on month 2, we still have to calculate all the same calculations, but the numbers we're using inside of our calculations will be different. So my interest, which again is PRT, has a different P.
Would be balance and pay.
Okay, that's the number we had from the slide before. Same interest rate though, right? It's a fixed rate. That will never change on this loan, 0.0375. It's still 1 month payment, so it's still 1/12.
Would that include every month?
Yes, it will. The only reason it wouldn't is if you were doing something on a mortgage, which sometimes people will do and pay bi-weekly, and that would be done differently, but you're not going to see any problems like that. I mention it because I want you to know there is, in reality, another option out in the real world. But typically, people pay monthly. That's the standard. All right, so what happens when I take 99,719.62 times 0.0375 times 1/12?
$711.62.
Did I hear you right, Tyler? Did I get that written right? Okay, good.
So every time the month is going to be 112.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, so my interest, $311.62, is going to go right here. It's slightly less than the month before, right? I mean, like a whole whopping, 90-something cents less, but it's slightly less. Now then, how do I find the principal payment? That is, how much my payment went towards the principal.
It's
280, what, oops, 281.26. Okay, are we good with that? How do I find out the balance of the principal? The balance on my account?
Do balance minus the principal.
Right, my previous balance, which was what? Good, 99,719.62 minus what? 281.26.
99438.
So after 2 months, I've paid nearly $1,200 towards the mortgage, right? I mean, not towards the mortgage, but I've paid that much out of my pocket. But this is actually only gone down a little over $500, right? Oh, at the end it's 36. Did I write it wrong? Sorry. Thank you. So 99,438.36.
So your monthly payment stays the same, but by the end of your mortgage, you'll be paying more of the interest.
Exactly. That is exactly true because you owe far less on the loan at the end than you do at the beginning. Yes, Matt.
This is kind of just a practicality question.
Mhm.
Like, say it comes in, but like, say I'm buying a house.
Mhm.
Is it going to say, like, on my statement, you owe $590 and this much is going to the bank? Or it is going to say, you need to make you make your own calculations.
No. What happens is that this amortization schedule you would get at the beginning of the loan, you probably would never see it again. I will tell you that I can go out to my online banking with my credit union and I can actually see every month how much of the money went towards interest and how much of the money went towards principal. And that's actually an important feature. And the reason that's important is because when you do taxes, things also come into play. How much interest you paid on something actually affects your tax information, which we'll get to that too a little bit in this lesson. But any questions on this calculation before I go on to the next slide? Yep, DJ. That one? Sure.
Question, would it be more practical to like get a smaller loan
Much more practical.
I didn't know that would affect like credit score or something. It's gotta be affected this way or instead of.
Your credit score affects whether or not you get loans, potentially. That's not a 100% true statement, but from what the perspective of what you're asking, that's the case. But how much money you're allowed to borrow typically depends on, one thing is your credit score, one thing is the job, how much money you make, and then payment history as well. So like if you've never had a credit card or never borrowed money before, they have to do what's called manual underwriting, which means they look at payment history, like if you've rented a house or rented an apartment for 2 years, they would go and they would contact your landlord and say, do they pay their payments on time? And they would start looking at those features. Yeah. All right, let me hit on one more thing before we head out, okay? There are 3 things that are not calculated that we did before in your mortgage, or costs of doing business in a house, and the cost of having a home. Those 3 things are property taxes, homeowner's insurance, and maintenance. Property taxes can go up or they can go down. It depends partially on the homes around you. It depends on a lot of different things. The property taxes go towards schools, for one thing, roads in your area. They go towards the city. Okay, so if I live in Shawnee, my property taxes go towards Shawnee City Schools. Okay, makes sense? All right, second thing, homeowner's insurance costs. It gives you coverage for several things. It's not just for if the tornado comes and blows your house away, although it does that. It also protects you in case somebody gets hurt on your property. So your son has somebody over and the dog bites him. His family is actually due medical expenses from your family because that dog bit him. And this covers your family from being sued by somebody else. That's important. That's more important in some sense than the house being blown away. Because somebody sues you, they're not suing you for the $100,000, $200,000 of their house. They're suing you for an awful lot more usually, right? So that's other. The last thing is maintenance. That varies a lot from the home, on the home due to age, construction, the condition, right? Different things like the dishwasher and the refrigerator breaking down for Ann and Andy earlier on. Those would be maintenance fees. If you're not renting something that actually already has the fridge in it, you're responsible if the fridge breaks, okay? All right, so what we're going to look at next time is we're going to look at actually the cost of home ownership, and we're going to look at some tax implications as well, and then we will be finishing up. Okay, so we're not quite finished with this. You can do the amortization questions in your book, though. So if you have any troubles in those, we'll talk about those next time. All right.